How do we begin the show again?
Wait, are we recording?
Yeah, we're live.
I didn't know we were recording.
We're live, baby.
I showed Montana that.
Did he love it?
Yeah, he did. He's like, why don't you use it?
We did in the live show.
Yeah, but you can't hear it.
Oh. Wait, really?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Does it?
I tried because it like separates the soundboard, I think, as an audio, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't because it's so. We were recording for so long.
Oh, man. I hope you can find that one at least.
Okay.
Okay. But you don't have to if you don't want to.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like. Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody. And welcome to Ghoul Society.
That's my big sister, Jamie.
And that's my little sister, Sarah. We are grateful to be recording on the unceded, stolen territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relations with the land continue to this day. As uninvited guests, we are committed to disrupting racism and colonial violence within ourselves, our families, and our communities. By listening to this podcast, you've officially been inducted into the Ghoul Society.
And you're back.
I'm back. Hey.
Hi.
Thank you, Montana. Big shout out.
Yeah, he did so good.
He did amazing.
He was actually very impressed that I knew how to set everything up.
Oh, yeah. And I loved when he was talking about, he was like, wait, so this is just the this is just the show?
like
because it's true, it feels like
you're bigger production.
Yeah.
When you're listening.
Yeah. Or like you're not doing enough. I always feel like I'm
Yes.
not doing enough, but then
Yes.
I listen back and I'm like, oh, this is actually so good. Like
Yeah,
every single
I know.
time.
Because we just sit and chat and he was like, okay, now what? And I was like, well, we're recording, so we're just going to talk now.
Yeah. Like this is it. This is the show.
Yeah.
This is the show. You know what? I really do want to.
Your story's so long.
Don't look at my story.
I can't read it. I
No.
need new glasses. I can't read that.
No, I know. I was just saying what you said to Montana.
Oh my God. He said he wasn't looking and he probably wasn't, but his eyes were moving towards my
I could see his eyes moving
laptop.
around. Oh my gosh.
tea break.
So, what's up?
Nothing. I don't
Whoa,
do any.
this is a very interesting episode. Well, you're going to be doing things. I heard on the last episode.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing things, but I guess it's not a lot of things, but to me it is because we don't usually go out.
Yeah.
We're very much homebodies. But yeah, so I've just been, working, trying to do exercise, even though it gets dark at like 3:30 already.
I know.
So it's just really hard to. I'm definitely feeling the winter blues.
The sads.
Yeah.
Someone lent me that sad lamp. Shout out.
I see
And I've been
that.
using it because I'm here in a dungeon, as you can tell.
Is it just to provide you with vitamin D?
I don't know if it actually does that or if it just tricks your brain into thinking that it is doing it.
Yeah, that it's sunlight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it actually helps a lot. Like, I find that I just feel like more energized
Right.
when I have that on instead of being like in this darkened, like, bleh, type
Yeah.
kind of room.
Yeah.
So, I think I will come to Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll come on the same day as you guys
Yeah.
or not, but I would like to see it
Yeah.
because why not?
I know, right?
It's so funny how they're being like, okay, when the movie came out, they were like, this Christmas, Sweeney Todd and the Demon Barbershop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, is this a Christmas movie? Or is this a spooky Halloween? Like, I know it was originally a play
Yeah.
until Tim Burton was like, let's try to make this into a movie.
I've never seen the movie.
I think I have long ago, so I don't remember it at all.
Yeah. I'm just excited.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to dress up real fancy?
Oh, am I supposed to?
You don't have to.
I
No,
don't think I will. We'll probably just dress warm because it's going to be cold.
Yeah, true. On Friday night, I went to the Uvik Wind Symphony, and it was so good.
Nice.
Like, it was incredible. I had some friends playing in it. And then there was also a bunch of high school choirs and another high school concert band that came and joined in with them as well. And it was so gorgeous. And then there were these two Haida women who also like produced this song. I think one of them did produced this song for like a whole choir and a concert band.
Yeah.
Like a whole orchestra, essentially. I probably have the terminology wrong. Sorry, everybody. And it was this beautiful song about how like everything is interconnected, and that's why we have to care about the world and the land and the people in our lives. And as soon as the choir came in, I was just like tears. Like, it was so beautiful. So beautiful. And then I even went out afterward, and I was up until like 1 a.m.
Whoa.
I know. And last night I was up until midnight.
Whoa.
I know.
Doing what? Hanging out?
Writing my story.
Oh. Fuck.
I know.
Oh, wow.
I just wanted it to be really good.
Yeah.
That's why it's so long.
Right.
And that's why
mine's quite long as well. So.
Okay. I'm excited. Okay. Maybe we get into it.
Okay.
Since they're so long.
Okay.
Okay. So mine is a local case.
Really?
And I'm going to start with, I try to write a little story kind of at the beginning usually, just to make it like a little more intriguing for people.
Okay.
As the evening darkened on September 29th, 1899, Agnes Bings wiped down the counters in her bakery. She was tidying and organizing for another big day of bread making, while her brother, William Jordan, sat in the corner reading his book by candlelight.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
She collected the many parcels she had to bring home that night and asked William if he would walk with her. William denied, claiming he was too enraptured in his book to be bothered. The rain outside pelted the windows and wind howled through the cracks of the wooden building. Annoyed but too tired to care, Agnes said goodnight to her brother and began making her way home, which was on Russell Street in Esquimalt, about 2 kilometers from the Pilgrim Bakery on Store Street. Instead of going the well-lit long way around, she walked the shortcut everyone used, the trestle that connected Fort Victoria to the Songhees Reserve. She was a confident, smart, and strong woman who could handle her own, taking care of her husband, John, who was partially paralyzed due to a stroke a few years earlier in his life, and their son, Arthur, who was around 8 years old. John noticed the time getting later and later and felt anxious knowing that Agnes was extremely punctual. He had thought perhaps she had decided to stay in town overnight with a friend, as the early fall storm shook the windows and rain flooded the dirt roads and small streams. Still worried but unable to help due to his disability and the lack of easy communication, John went to sleep. When he rose with the dawn, he got a hold of some friends and found the police, and they all immediately began searching for Agnes. Sadly, the police found her lifeless body, nude, strangled, and disemboweled. This is Victoria's most infamous and grisly case, the murder of Agnes Bings.
Oh my God. This story, crazy.
I know.
This story haunts me.
I meant to say this at the beginning. If you are someone that is squeamish, you will probably not like this episode. If you do not like the more thicker true crime stories, you will not like this episode. No. Please just skip this episode.
Yeah.
Okay, this is your warning right now. This is a really, really intense and really, really sad case. That's your warning. We'll give you a second to turn it off, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, they're gone.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. It's 1899, and Victoria is extremely young. In 1843, James Gugless.
More like James Gutless.
Whoa. Pretty good.
I hate him.
James Douglas, with a Roman Catholic pioneer, anchored off Clover Point. The next day, they chose the site for Fort Victoria. Very quickly, the Hudson's Bay Company officially founded Victoria on March 14th, 1843, at the location that the Lekwungen peoples called Camosac, meaning rush of water. The Lekwungen peoples and Esquimalt and Songhees nations have been living sustainably and comfortably on this land for time immemorial, and during European colonization they were pushed off their lands onto small reserves and forced to sign blank documents which were then filled in by colonists after the fact. Or sometimes there was writing on it, but they weren't translated properly to them.
No.
So this created the imaginary story that land was sold or gifted to settlers from indigenous peoples of this area. This is why the land is unceded. It has been illegally obtained through brutal trickery and thievery, amongst other horrors. In the 1850s, people found gold in this area, and the population went from 500 to 20,000 people in 6 months.
It did? Oh, I didn't know that.
It was booming because that was also
crazy.
right before the Yukon's like Klondike gold rush.
Yeah.
So people essentially just like went north from here.
Oh, okay.
Many buildings that were built at that time to house people are the same old buildings that exist today. In 1886, Victoria became the capital of BC, and it is still the capital to this day. So 50 years later, not 50 years from then, but 50 years from when Victoria was originally created.
Yeah.
It was a gritty, dirty, wily port city.
Yeah, it was.
Chinatown at this time was full of shops, gambling dens, opium factories, and densely packed wooden shacks. 10 years prior to Agnes's death, there were still public hangings happening at Bastion Square. And 1 year before Agnes's death, in 1998, 1998.
Yep.
Wait, 18...
Wait,
1898, a sex worker named Belle Adams had severed the head of her lover after he threatened to leave her for another woman.
Yes.
Do you know that story?
Yeah, it's on Ghostly Walks. It's
well,
part of
they
Ghostly
changed the Ghostly Walk every tour.
Oh,
So sometimes
I've heard
it's
that one
not.
twice.
Wait, was she in the hotel? No, that was the stairs thing. You know, where they're putting that new university building.
No, that's a different one. Belle was in Bastion Square, and then they were fighting, and then she grabbed a straight razor off the table and just like lashed out.
Right. Yes.
And then she unfortunately killed him, and she didn't actually mean to. She was just trying to push him away.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember that story. Yes. Yeah. So things are kind of crazy around here in the
also,
late 1800s.
Sorry. That area of downtown, like Johnson, is now considered our shopping district, but it used to be the red light district of the city.
Yeah, I kind of get into that. Well, not really. I want to get more into it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy.
I just feel like there's not actually that much information. It's just the same thing said over and over, but I want more details.
I know.
It's super challenging to do these cases.
I know. I wonder if the museum has any archives.
Well, there are like the archives. There's an archive section in Oak Bay, and there is the one by the museum. There's archives, and there's also UVic archives.
Right.
And I used for some of the story and something I do want to read, but it might be too long, so we'll stick it in on the end in case people don't want to hear it.
Okay.
But I think I'll read it to you anyways.
Yeah.
But it's not really it's connected to the story. It is the story, but you don't need to listen to it to understand the full story.
Right.
Anyways, it's an online version of the Daily Colonist.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like all the old newspapers, but not that old. So I tried to find the original newspaper from the story, and I don't know. It might be just in the archive, like physically.
Yeah, because when I was doing my previous story on Doris Gravlin, I went on the Royal Museum's website, and I couldn't find anything. Yeah. And I was like, but I know that they have this newspaper.
I know. It's so hard.
It's just a hard copy.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. There isn't much more known about Agnes other than she was an immigrant from Germany, and she married John when she arrived in Victoria. That's when she got her last name, Bings. Her maiden name, I didn't write it down. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Agnes. Please don't come for me.
I'm sure it's fine.
He had worked on the ENN railway until he suffered from a stroke, and then he was paralyzed. Unfortunately, because of the time, there was no real therapy for this type of health situation, so he was unable to ever work again. but he actually lived into his 80s.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Damn, John.
In 1899, Agnes was 44 and a proprietor of her and her hubby's shared business, which was the Pilgrim Bakery. It was close to the vibrant red light district, which Sarah just talked about, on Store Street in Market Square. The bakery is now home to a home goods store called Paboom. So it still exists. So next time y'all downtown and y'all in Paboom, you think about Agnes.
Also, I think it's pretty fucking sick that her husband got injured and she's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
the bakery's mine now.
Well, wait, sick as in cool or sick as in nasty?
No, like cool, like she's a woman and she
Yeah.
was like running this bakery.
Well, the bakery, they made the bakery after he got paralyzed because he couldn't work anymore.
Right.
And so technically, like, he didn't actually have anything to do with it, but
It was all
because she
her.
was a woman,
Yeah.
she couldn't own the business
Oh,
herself.
so it was under his name.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got it. Yeah. And so
But that's so cool of her. I love
I know
that.
it was super cool because obviously it was super uncommon for women at the time to own and operate businesses,
Yeah.
especially with having a husband at home unable to work.
And a child at home too.
That's right. She also employed her brother, William Jordan, at the bakery. So it really was a small family business.
Right. I wonder how good their bread was.
Me
I love
too.
bread. It probably
Me
was.
too. Not that good.
No.
I mean maybe it was good, but in the Victorian era in England, sorry, not in the in the Industrial Revolution era
Yes.
is when they started putting like chalk in people's bread. They would fill it with other things.
Ugh.
Yeah, I kind of
I wanna
like,
throw up.
I am interested in just talking about all the weird shit that happened in industrial era England.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll
They
do a
did
whole
some
episode
really
like
weird
that.
shit. Also, though,
Like the wallpaper.
yeah, I would love for you and Bristol to make a bread recipe from the 1800s because I'm sure you could find one.
Yeah, I'm sure it's literally just like flour, water, salt. Some
yeah, I
yeast.
know, but I want to try.
I bet I could just do it. Like I'll just make it up. But
And
okay,
probably
I'll follow an old
probably
one.
slap.
I'm a sourdough queen. Anything
Yeah.
that's not sourdough, I'm like, get it out of my house.
Okay.
Yeah, now you all know. So, as we know from the picture that we've painted so far, Agnes was an extremely hardworking and caring wife and mother who did her best to support her family.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have much of a social life because she was always working, and bakery hours are literally crazy. Like her neighbors were like, yeah, we see her like leave and come home, and that's essentially it.
Yeah.
So back to the night of September 29th.
Mm-hmm.
It's already kind of suspicious that William didn't want to walk Agnes home.
Yeah, like you're her brother, man.
Yeah, and also like you are a male with a female in the 1800s when like that would be your duty.
Yeah, to walk a woman home.
Yeah, but let's just roll with it for now.
Okay.
Before I get into how she was found, there's a statement from another lady who is traveling at night around the same time as Agnes on the same like trestle bridge.
Oh.
Mrs. Balls had been...
Mrs. Balls?
Oh, I didn't like when you don't read things out loud. Always when you're typing, you're just typing.
You're just like, yeah.
Maybe it's Bales. It's Bales. Oh my god. Mrs. Bales had been heading toward the railway bridge when she saw a cloaked figure standing around all of the like railway buildings. She
Ew.
noticed that he started following her, like heading toward the Songhees Reserve. So you can picture it, right?
Yes.
Because yes. Did you already say this? The trestle is where now the Johnson Bridge is.
I
Just
didn't
so-
say that, but
okay.
yes, that is what I'm picturing in my
Okay,
mind.
perfect. Yep, just so everyone knows. Picture you're heading from downtown Victoria to Esquimalt on the Johnson Bridge. That used to
Yes.
be an old train trestle at the time.
Because the only bridge was the Bay Street Bridge.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
So, and that was the well-lit one.
Yeah, but she didn't want to take the long way home. She
That's
wanted
right.
to get home.
Yeah. So
as soon as
Agnes
possible.
had taken, just to really clear it all, Agnes had taken the trestle bridge, and then her body was found on the side of the Songhees Reserve down on the bank by the river.
Right.
Or, sorry, the river. The giant river. No, the bay, the harbor.
Yes.
So this lady, Mrs. Bales, yeah, she noticed that he was following her, and she ducked into a group of men going the other direction, heading back toward downtown, because she was like, fuck that. She waited until she thought the figure moved on, and then she made for the bridge as Agnes was doing the same. They both reached the Songhees shore, the western shore.
Yeah.
And then they went their separate ways, and she saw the figure step off the bridge and follow Agnes. She claimed about 5 minutes later she heard 2 screams. Now, this has been contested.
Yeah.
Like, as in, like, okay, you're just making this, like, now a salacious story. Like, if you heard her screaming, why didn't you do something?
Or, like, if you saw him following her, why wouldn't you, like, call out?
Yeah, exactly.
To
but
her?
I mean, also, like,
that, but
it would be
makes
super scary.
Yeah, it would make sense that she wouldn't call out
Mm-hmm.
because that's scary and she was already creeped out by this cloaked guy.
Yeah.
But also some people would be like, well, why didn't you do this?
Yeah, of course.
Was victim blaming.
Yeah. So who knows what she actually saw and heard, but that is her story.
Right.
So now I'm going to get into how she was found. This is your second
gruesome.
warning that the next minute or two will be super gruesome. So please fast forward if you are not interested about hearing the details.
Mm-hmm.
I took this quote from the Daily Colonist, and it says, "At least this the police surmised, as it was here that her body was found beside the railway embankment at the base of a telegraph pole.
Mm-hmm.
Her hair was disheveled, showing that she had made a desperate fight for her life, and death apparently had been caused by strangulation. Dr. R.L. Fraser surmising this by the deep furrows in the dead woman's neck, which indicated either superhuman strength on the part of her killer or that he had used a rope or a strap to do the deed.
Mm-hmm.
The ridges in her windpipe had been caused by such pressure that strands of her hair remained impressed in the folds where the murderer's thumbs or garrote had been pressed." So you can kind of imagine that, right? Like your hair like this.
Yeah.
So to summarize that, Agnes had died by strangulation. She was found completely naked. Her clothes were carried away from the scene of the murder and thrown into a bush. Her lower body had been viciously slashed by a blunt object, with gouges that were notably around her genitals and her perineum. Her womb and her ovaries were still attached, but they lay outside her body, and 12 feet of her intestines were missing. So that could have been, like, the intestines could have maybe been eaten by an animal or something.
Yeah.
She is, like, right on the ocean there, but
yeah,
I mean, it could have also just been this depraved human.
Yeah.
The police knew that they were immediately in over their heads, so they brought in some outside help. Detectives from the Pinkerton Agency in Portland, Oregon.
Pinkertons have arrived.
They've arrived. They sailed over to Victoria to help solve the case. Now, this man's name, this detective, he was never recorded, and so he's just known as Agent Number 5. So Agent Number 5
mysterious.
was on the case.
Okay.
And he was ready to take charge and solve the murder.
Okay.
So, of course, because she was found on the reserve, Indigenous people were immediately blamed.
Ugh.
During this time, the reserve was right in the Victoria Inner Harbor, now where the giant hotel is.
Yes.
It's like the Delta Ocean Point, I think.
Yeah.
The reserve was established in the mid-1800s after the Lekwungen-speaking peoples were displaced from the southern tip of the island due to colonial settlements and resource extraction.
Mm-hmm.
The reserve was a small community that had wooden homes, a church, a school, and some small shops. Again, remember that this was all part of the assimilation plan created by European settlers and specifically by Catholic priests. However, many of the Indigenous residents were still engaged in their traditional lifestyles and spent time fishing and shellfish harvesting. They also worked as laborers and tradespeople in the city. Life on the reserve was super intense and poverty-stricken, and Indigenous peoples faced, and still face, marginalization and dispossession. Against all odds, the Songhees have maintained strong cultural traditions and connections, asserting their rights and sovereignty against ongoing colonial violence, and existing in important roles in what is now Victoria today. Surprisingly, the newspapers at the time actually realized that they weren't the ones who did it, and that they were not part of the murder.
Oh.
But it was still pretty, like, fucked up and racist how they talked about it.
Oh, of course. And I'm sure a lot of the settlers still believed that Indigenous people did it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, like, part of the article that I will read later.
Okay.
So remember the lady that I mentioned earlier? Miss Balls. Mrs. Bales. She was the only one that ever saw the murderer.
Right.
And so that's how we get that description of, like, the overcoated figure. He was quick in his movements. He was wearing a scarf that concealed his face and rubber boots to try and hide the sound of his footsteps on the wooden trestle.
Ew.
I know.
What the fuck?
And so, okay, this is a little side tangent. I listened to this episode on this podcast called Seeing Dead People.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
Maybe.
So it's these two ladies, these two gals, these two ghouly girlies. And one of them is a medium.
Okay.
And the other one, like, so they get together. The other one has the story.
Yeah.
She doesn't tell the medium, Darcy, about the story.
Okay.
And she tries to see what the medium can already sense.
Oh, that's cool.
It's super cool. And so before she got to, like, the description of the person, she was like, can you tell me what you sense about the suspect that everyone says that was seen at the crime?
Yeah.
Or that, like, Mrs. Bales says.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. And, like, I see him kind of, like, hobbling or walking strangely.
Oh.
And it makes sense if you're wearing rubber boots.
Yeah.
You can't really walk like that normally.
Right.
Like, there's a certain rubber boot walk. The rubber boot walk. You know it. Yeah, so I just thought that was really cool. She kind of nailed that. She nailed a lot of things.
Oh, wow.
It was a really, really awesome episode.
Oh, cool.
To listen to.
Yeah.
And I recommend checking them out. They're really cool. So Agent Number 5 realized that Vic police were super incompetent.
And dumb.
And they still are. Oops. And the most promising leads that they had were that of psychics, spiritualists, and self-proclaimed clairvoyants. Kind of like the medium that was on that podcast.
Right.
Now, we're going to go over the suspects.
Okay.
There was Coates, that's the name of the guy, who had made improper proposals to Bings in her bakery.
Oh.
There was Bill Helburn. He walked into the city's Tivoli Theater on the night of the murder and began aggressively telling the manager about a play that he wanted to write about a woman who is killed and cut into pieces.
I love that for him.
Love it. Okay.
That's so great.
Then there was Bob, quote unquote, who was an indigenous man who threatened a woman on the reserve that he would cut her up like he did that white woman.
Oh.
But I doubt that it was Bob.
Okay, don't say those kinds of things.
I know. Yeah, don't. Come on.
Maybe
guys.
he didn't say that, but if he did, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. Then another suspect, William Jordan, who obviously is her brother. This is the one that Agent Number 5 liked the most.
Oh.
Jordan was a heavy drinker, known for his violent temper.
Okay.
And before Agnes's body was found, he was declaring that his sister had been murdered.
What? Wait, what?
Before her body was found, he's like, my sister has been murdered. Sus.
Okay, what, like, during the, like, early morning hours, he was like, oh, Agnes.
I guess so.
She'd been murdered.
True. I know.
Okay,
it's weird.
How do you know? She'd been murdered.
And William also tried to pin it on the indigenous people.
Well, yeah.
Of course. And he also could have had the motive of taking over his sister's business.
Yeah.
And just being like a general misogynist and being
Right.
angry that his sister, a woman, how dare she be a woman,
Yeah.
owned a business and was doing better than him, and that he had to work for her instead of the other
just
way
a
around.
lowly writer.
He wasn't even a writer, he was a reader. He was just reading a book.
Oh, I thought he was writing. What did he do?
He worked at the bakery too.
Oh, that's it though?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he had another career or something.
No. So I think that's also why it's a pretty good guess.
Oh.
And like he knew that she was gonna be there,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
like, I'm gonna read my book. Sneak, sneak, sneak.
Then we have a suspect that everyone thinks it was maybe him, but
Da, 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 da.
I don't know. The medium on the podcast was like, no, it's not him. And I just kind of trust mediums a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows really?
Okay.
Anyway, his name is David McDonald Gordon. He was a 73-year-old drifter with connections to the city's seedy underworld. I know he's old, right? Like
He's
for the
very
time.
old.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think
Could he
so.
even walk across a trestle? No, I'm serious.
Woof.
They would like trestles are dangerous, man.
It's true.
Like,
I
could
know.
he have walked across there?
I don't know. Because also, who's the old guy that was killing? Like Golden State Killer. Golden State Killer is pretty old. He was like in his 50s, but not in his 70s.
When he was still killing people?
Yeah, wasn't he? I know he wasn't found till later and he hadn't killed for a long time, but I guess what I'm trying to say is age doesn't necessarily mean anything,
No, it's true.
but it kind of also does.
But I mean, like, there's a big difference for a lot of people between like 50 and 73.
I know. Okay, but listen to this. So he
Okay.
was recruited as an auxiliary constable to help with the murder investigation.
Oh?
But suspiciously, he had a really deep, intimate knowledge of the case. And he was adamant that the killer was named Jim McCluskey, who had left town and couldn't be found. So Gordon ended up in jail for petty theft.
Okay.
And Pinkerton put agent number 3 in the cell with him.
Oh,
Like as an undercover. Yeah.
Okay.
So this agent 3 endured many of Gordon's stories. He talked about his stints as a back alley doctor for sex diseases, quote, quote, the endless young girls he boasted of ruining. Ew, fucking disgusting. Fuck
Ew.
off. His lewd stories of Victoria women receiving crude vasectomies, which he referred to as being disemboweled. Also, fuck off.
Ew.
Agent 3, okay, I don't agree with this, and it's really fucked up that he did this, but okay, so Agent 3 made up a story of raping a 15-year-old girl.
Oh my God.
And Gordon loved it.
Ew.
I know. I'm
What the
sorry.
fuck?
I know. I'm sorry. I know. This really, really fucked up.
To like, he made up that story to try to get
Yeah.
like Agnes's death out of him?
Yeah. Or just like more information. I don't know. It's like, bro, you already know he's twisted. Like, do you really need to do something like that?
Yeah, like you really need to plant that into his mind.
Yeah, like, no. Ew. So 3 was convinced that he murdered Agnes or had at least been connected to the murder or other like serious troubles in the past, obviously.
Right.
Agnes's murder came up once, but actually it was from another inmate.
Oh?
That like another inmate just kind of brought it up, and apparently Gordon clammed up and repeated that Jim McCluskey had done it. He then said to 3, quote, "If you ever kill a man, never let the blood of the man's head get on your clothes or even your hands, for it will never come off." End quote. He was like looking at his hands, saying that. And it was like very genuine. Like it wasn't just like a story. It was like this thing. And so
Like you'll
3
never
was
stop
like,
seeing it.
yeah. And, oh, nice. Nice, you little psychologist over there.
Well, that's what he means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
Like every time
You like look at your hands.
you just see blood.
Yeah. Ugh.
Ugh.
Yeah, so
Okay.
here's the thing though.
Okay.
Gordon died from a pulmonary hemorrhage in the jail not that long after.
Oh.
And so that's the end of that lead.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Finally.
Gordon, Jesus.
The last suspect, Jack the Ripper.
No, really?
Do you think
of course it's Jack the Ripper.
Do you think we'll ever do that case?
Oh my God. I don't know if we could deep dive enough.
I know, like Elena from Morbid did
that's what I was
an
saying.
amazing, it was like a 5-parter.
Yeah. I know.
And like I don't think I could. I would love to.
Yeah, not during this time. Maybe like in the future. I don't know. Like
maybe in like a year.
Yeah, it's just the time and effort that and the like sleuthing that requires.
Yeah,
is so fucking intense.
So much information. And it's so salacious.
Yes.
I'm kind of like, Anyway, so people have leaned into the narrative that Jack the Ripper came to Victoria on a boat, murdered Agnes, and then just vanished into thin air and never murdered anyone else or went back to London.
Yeah.
So, however, there were also these other 2 women that were found around the same spot that Agnes was found.
What?
Yes. And I didn't know about this either. I only know about this from reading the fucking newspaper article from the 70s.
Okay. When were they found?
So one was an Indigenous woman who was found nude, though apparently her death didn't have any foul play involved.
Okay, well, it probably fucking did.
Yeah. You don't just get, like, unless you're in psychosis or something.
Yeah.
But, like, you don't just get found nude murdered. Or, like, killed or dead.
Yeah, like, that reminds me of Lisa Lamb.
Yes.
So much.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just, that just doesn't happen.
No.
Unless, you know?
No. So, and she's not named, unfortunately. Of course.
Oh
she's
my
not
God,
named.
That poor soul.
There was also a black woman. I'm pretty sure they called her a colored woman, of course, because racism. So I don't want to assume, but I'm going off of this presumption. So probably a black woman, a woman of color, we can say.
Yeah.
Named Maddie Crow.
Okay.
And she was also found dead close to where Agnes was found.
Okay.
Now, I tried to look up Maddie Crow's death, and I couldn't find anything on it, of course. I, like, went through the archives. I really fucking tried. Could not find it.
Yeah. Did you try to find her on findagrave.com?
I did a little bit, but I didn't. Maybe I didn't try enough.
She might not have a grave marker.
No, like there's a Maddie Crow in the States. There was just not one that lined up with the date.
Okay, yeah.
With like this kind of later 1800s. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, those are really sad, and I really feel for.
Of course that happened. Of course they're not reported, and I didn't even know that.
But
of course I didn't know that because they're women of color, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that's really fucking shitty, and of course it's just all about Agnes's death, even though those women were found. I guess like Agnes was really viciously murdered.
So they were just found murdered.
Yeah.
The Indigenous woman was naked was the other one, or she just was clothed murdered?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I might talk about it in the article.
Okay.
I didn't note it down, so I think it might have been similar to Agnes's, but not as so intense. I'm not sure if she was clothed.
So it seems like maybe who was murdered first?
I think it was
Miss Crow.
I think so.
Okay. So if you look at it that way, that's a big escalation.
Actually, I feel like it might have been the Indigenous woman.
Oh, really?
And then Miss Crow, and then Agnes. So that makes sense. I never even thought about the escalation. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, but it would make more sense if Miss Crow, if she was clothed, it would make more sense that she was murdered first, and then the Indigenous woman because she was naked, and then Agnes because not only, was she murdered, but she was cut open and naked.
Yeah, I know.
So, like, that order would be a big escalation for this murderer.
Yeah. Fuck, it's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see when we get to the article.
Okay.
maybe we can tie the dots a little bit more. But
Okay.
I think that's also why, like, the Jack the Ripper thing kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
In a weird way. And that was also the year, or the couple years, I think, that he took, like, a break in England.
Right.
I don't know, though. That's a fucking stretch.
It is, but also not really.
Yeah.
Like, he
True.
could have just got
That's
on
true.
a boat and come here and been
True.
like, you know what? The police are on me. I'm going to just go to North America. And then he wound up here.
Yeah.
Committed some murders. Was like, oh, I don't know, maybe he heard word that the police in England wound up like, no, there's no more traces of this guy. So he's like, great, I can go back home.
Yeah.
Went back home.
I know. It's crazy. So, tragically, we will never know who murdered Agnes Bings, as this case remains unsolved. Maybe one day there will be some sleuths who can solve it, or I thought maybe we could also reach out to Paul Holes and Kate Winkler-Dawson from Buried Bones, and maybe they could go over the case. However, people say that they see her ghost haunting the place where she took her last breath.
Yes.
So people who are staying in the Delta Ocean Point Hotel, if you're in the lower hotel restaurant, which is by the beach, like, well, it's not a beach anymore, but
By the water's edge.
actually it kind of is, actually, now that I think about it. Oh, brain. They see a shadowy woman drifting along, pacing back and forth, and some people even hear her screams.
That's so chilling.
I know.
That's so awful if she's like reliving, like her spirit's reliving that over and over and over again.
And she's just stuck there.
Yeah.
So next time you're down in Victoria's Harbour, take a moment to reflect on Agnes's story. Come with peace and calm energy, so maybe she can finally rest easy after all of these years. And that is the story of Agnes Bings. You ready for the article?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was written 1973.
Okay.
And it says, 74 years ago, monster stalked Victoria. Sadly, despite the most intensive investigation by 2 police departments, the fiendish killer of Agnes Bings was never captured, and the murder remains unsolved. Oh, also, they call her last name Bing instead of Bings. So, a violent sou'wester was buffeting the city that wintry night as John Bing waited anxiously in his Victoria West home. Although it was only 9 o'clock, his wife should have long returned from the Store Street bakery, which she ran with her brother, William Jordan, who served as baker, Mrs. Bing acting as cashier, which, like, no, but okay. Since a stroke had left Mr. Bing totally disabled, the couple had to rely upon their little bakery, of which his 45-year-old wife had managed to make a modest success, John acting as babysitter to their young son.
Fucking hate that, bro. You're not a fucking babysitter. You're a parent.
Dad.
Oh my, fuck off.
I
That
know.
bugs me so fucking
I
much.
know.
I hate when people say that. No, that is like, that makes me so
Triggered.
enraged. Yeah, it triggers me so hard.
Yeah.
Whenever I see that like online, I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Ugh.
I love it.
It's
Go
such
off.
an ick. I hate it. It's so disgusting. And I hate when people joke about it because then it just gets me really angry. And I'm like, I know you're joking, but that's so disgusting.
Yeah. Hate it. But as the minutes ticked by, he became increasingly concerned. She usually closed the shop at 7:30, crossed over the ENN railway bridge, then cut through the Indian Reserve bound to the west side of the harbour, completing the half-mile trek within half an hour. More time passed, and, without a telephone, Bing had no way of knowing what had delayed her. Finally, at midnight, convinced that she had decided to stay in town due to the storm, he retired, although he later told a coroner's jury that had he been able to, he would have looked for her. I think John is a good guy, like, I really
so
do.
too, and that's really sad. And also,
really
he wasn't
sad.
completely disabled. Why did they say that? That's so fucking
I know.
disgusting too. Like, okay, he couldn't walk.
You're gonna hate the rest of this article
Dude,
so much.
I hate this article.
I know.
There's-
Well, I think half of his body was paralyzed because when you have a stroke, the left half is usually paralyzed.
I thought he just couldn't walk.
No, he had a stroke.
Yeah, I know that.
Oh, well, yes, he couldn't walk, but he probably also couldn't use his whole left side.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, still.
With the dawn, he was up and sent word to those of their friends with whom she would have been likely to stay. Upon learning that none had seen Agnes, the panic-stricken former railway worker notified police constable Robert Walker, answering Bing's plea for assistance. Tracing the missing woman's movements, Walker crossed the trestle, continued along the railway track to the rock cut over what is now a Squamalt Road, where the right-of-way forked to the right and crossed the reserve. It was 9 o'clock when the officer's attention was drawn to a battered form in the hollow, the nude, dismembered body of Agnes Bing. So here they say dismembered. I'm a little weary on the, confused on the details, but.
Maybe they just mean dismembered because her insides were taken out.
It's true.
Which is so
fucked up. The police of the city and the province have a crime to unravel that for fiendishness and mysteriousness has seldom been equaled in this part of the world, reported the colonists Sunday morning. On Friday evening between 7 and 8 o'clock, a woman was cruelly murdered on a well-traveled thoroughfare and within a few yards of occupied houses, and not until 12 hours later was her body found, so that the murderer had lots of time to cover up his tracks and get well away from the scene of his crime. Curiously, the story of the grimmest atrocity in Victoria history was buried on page 6, the colonist giving front page notice to the worsening troubles in South Africa. Isn't that interesting? Because at the time there was the Boers War.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. The victim of this terrible murder, the details of which are too revolting for publication 2 days after, in covering the inquest, the newspaper would give the revolting details in all their gore, was Mrs. John Bing, a hard-working, industrious, and eminently respectable woman who, with her brother, William Jordan, conducted a bakery on Store Street to support her invalid husband and 8-year-old son. All right, let's just dissect that. Oh my
God, what the fuck?
Let's dissect this paragraph. Ew. Okay, 1. Mrs. John Bing. I hate that shit. She is her own fucking person.
I hate when, at weddings, people introduce
Wait.
the couple as Mr. and Mrs. man's name, last name. I'm like, what the? Ew.
Yes. Okay, that.
Fucking gross.
2, they just keep saying how, she's only doing the bakery with her brother. She can't do it on her own.
Yeah.
Is bullshit. She's running that ship.
Yeah. He's just reading.
He's reading his stupid fucking book.
He's just reading and he's like, my sister runs it, but people think I run it 'cause I'm a man.
Yep. And then also calling her husband invalid.
Yeah, what the fuck, man?
I know. Okay. So according to the police report, Mrs. Bing had left the Store Street Bakery from sometime between 7 and 8 p.m. Friday as usual to begin the lonely walk through the reserve to her Russell Street residence. Although the shortest route between town and home, it was, as the newspaper noted, a walk that few women would care to take at night. But Mrs. Bing was used to it, and besides being a great lover of her home, which she managed to keep in perfect order despite her long hours at the store.
Of course she did.
That little section was also a quote from the older paper. Sorry, I should have used my old paper voice. 3/4 of a century after, despite the fact that the Songhees Reserve has yielded to the Ministry of Transport docks, more like they stole it.
What?
And with the advent of street lighting, businesses and homes throughout the area, this still could be an unnerving walk for a woman at night. For Mrs. Bing, it was her last. At the rock cut which today forms the intersection of Esquimalt and Tyee roads, she was accosted by a monster in human guise. At least, this the police surmised, as it was here that her body was found beside the railway embankment at the base of the telegraph pole. Her hair was disheveled, showing that she had made a desperate fight for her life, and death apparently had been caused by strangulation, Dr. R.L. Fraser surmising this by the deep furrows in the dead woman's neck, which indicated either superhuman strength on the part of her killer, or that he had used a rope or strap to do the deed. The ridges in her windpipe had been caused by such pressure that strands of her hair remained impressed in the folds where the murderer's thumbs or garrote had been pressed, which I quoted in my story earlier.
Yes.
Perhaps the single redeeming feature of the atrocity was the fact that the victim had been killed before mutilation.
Yeah.
Robbery was first considered as motive due to the fact that 2 rings had been taken from the victim's hand. This apparent motive was reinforced when Victoria Police, under Chief Harry Shepherd, and Provincial Police, under Superintendent Fred Hussey, discovered her purse in the E&N yard on the eastern side of the bridge.
Okay, no, fuck off. It wasn't robbery.
I know.
Are you kidding me?
Thought to have contained $6 or $7, it was empty. We'll come back to this because they actually come back to it later in the article. Police considered it possible that the killer's first thought had been robbery, but when Mrs. Bing, although described as being of slender build, fought back, he had lost control. The location of her purse did, at least, indicate that the killer had returned to town. Of one other fact, the police were convinced: the slayer was a madman. This in mind, they proceeded to round up and question every vagrant, derelict, and resident with a history of erratic behavior, those whose answers seemed vague being detained to keep them out of harm's way. So they literally detained anyone whose answers were vague to their questioning.
Okay.
Yeah. Due to the location of the murder, there were those who took it for granted that, this is what it says in the paper, that Indians were responsible, although police at first thought this unlikely as, quote, Indians seldom or never commit murder without provocation, and when they do not mutilate the body in the way Mrs. Bing was.
Okay.
Hindering the investigation most was the matter of Friday night's storm, where few were afoot, particularly in such a lonely area. Worse, a torrential downpour had erased any possible evidence, such as footprints, the rain having been so heavy that it had washed away all traces of blood near the body.
I mean, that's just classic Victoria.
Yeah. Rumors of all kinds were rife during the day, the community being considerably worked up over the tragedy, editorialized the Colonist, and there was quite a rush to the police station when the report circulated that the murderer had been arrested. Unfortunately, it turned out to be but one of many fruitless leads. From the start, police felt there was little concern between Charles St. John, an itinerant, a laborer from California, and Mrs. Bing's murder. So that was another guy. I didn't put him in my suspects because he's not really a lead.
Okay.
It had been during one of the detectives' several trips to the murder scene that they had observed St. John sitting in a corner of the E&N yard on Store Street. Not 10 yards away, they had discovered her empty purse. This, plus the fact that the 31-year-old laborer gave evidence of being disturbed, led to his arrest.
Disturbed?
Yeah, disturbed.
Okay.
After a medical examination, he was thoroughly examined. Officers learning that he had recently quit his job as a woodcutter on a Colwood farm, hiking into town, quote, on account of some illusion which he says drove him from his camp, end quote. Isn't that crazy?
Like hallucination?
I think so.
Oh, that's sad.
For days, he said, he had lived on nothing but bread and water, a cure for leg cramps, and had divided his time in town between a View Street cottage owned by his father and Beacon Hill Park.
Okay.
All agreed, if reluctantly, that the police will have to look further than St. John for the perpetrator of the crime, and to do this, they have a difficult task before them. Others recalled the brutal strangulation of, and now again this is written in the newspaper, of a colored woman known as Mattie Crow, several years before, at a time when similar murders had plagued police in Denver and in San Francisco. More recently, the nude body of an Indian woman had been found not 100 yards from where Mrs. Bings was murdered. So it was Mattie, and then it was the second woman.
Okay. Escalation.
Investigation had revealed, however, that death had been due to natural causes. That's literally it. There's no more.
For Mattie or the indigenous woman?
I don't even know. I guess I thought that was related to the indigenous women, but maybe both of them. But I'm like, give me more. Like, that's all that they're saying.
There's no way it would be natural causes, bro.
I don't know. You're
telling me that these two women, well, first of all, one of them is naked.
I know.
Or, like, what? Did someone take her clothes from her? Like, rob her dead body?
Maybe. I know. It's really disgusting.
I hate that.
I wish I had more information.
Yeah.
By the following day, police had little more to go on than they had when Constable Walker discovered the body. They had, however, begun to suspect that Indians were responsible responsible. So again, they're pulling them in, noting that many visitors from northern tribes called at and departed from the local reserve at all hours. The discovery of an Indian basket containing some dried fish, a can of fish, and some freshly picked wild peas near the murder scene sparked this new theory, although the fact that the basket had been found on the reserve seemed to weaken its potential as evidence, and authorities admitted that it was a rather vague clue to work on.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. So again, they're being like, it could be the indigenous people, and then they're like, no. And then they're like, but it's
But
right
the
there.
basket with the berries.
Yeah, literally.
Oh my god, bro. You're on their land.
Yep.
Hello.
So consequently, police had narrowed their investigation to searching for two crucial leads: the location of either Mrs. Bing's clothing, which the murderer evidently had carried away, and her jewelry.
Yeah.
The fact that most of the woman's clothing was missing seemed to strengthen the argument of those who suspected that the culprit, or culprits, had been from the reserve. But police did not overlook another fascinating possibility, that the murderer, who had likely returned to town, had dressed himself in Mrs. Bing's clothing. Okay.
I'm pretty sure that people would notice and stare, especially back then, of a man in women's clothing.
I don't know. Yeah, I know.
You know, they'd be like, hey, did you see that guy wearing that dress?
Yeah.
You know? They'd be like, what the fuck is that guy doing?
Armed with a description and sample of the victim's costume, officers even searched the harbor vicinity with grappling irons, but without trace of the garments, which, due to the fashions of the day, would have formed quite a bundle. True.
Yeah.
The second day of investigation ended with the pronouncement by doctors who had examined the body that the murderer was a sex pervert, and with a statement by police to the effect that they were convinced that the murderer or murderers had fled from town on Friday night before discovery of the crime by canoe or boat. This much all could agree upon, that the killer must have been very powerful or had the temporary strength of a madman. The murdered woman was strong and robust, and it goes without saying that she made a desperate struggle to save herself, not giving in until the rope or strap, which she was strangled, had been tightly drawn around her neck. The mutilation had effected with a knife, said Dr. Fraser. If nothing else, police were enthusiastic, several officers volunteering their free time to the case and tracking down every lead, no matter how small. Detective Palmer and Constable Murray of the provincial force even rushed to a Squamish halfway house to question an obnoxious drunk. Halfway, at least as far as the colonist was concerned, there had been some dispute between the officers of the city and the provincial forces, the reserve having becoming something of a jurisdictional no man's land. So they literally just go to this halfway house and they're like, well, you're a drunk, so you probably murdered and disemboweled this woman.
Okay, it is never mentioned that if they think she fought so hard for her life, there would likely be marks on the assailant.
Yes.
There is no way that she would fight for her life and not like scratch.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. I agree.
Or like hit.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I know. It's crazy. So who's got the bruises and scratches?
Exactly.
Anyone?
Apparently no one. So maybe he did flee.
Maybe. The coroner's inquest, held on October 2nd, did offer some surprises to the public. Biggest of these was Constable Redgrave's testimony that Mrs. Bing's purse had been found on the west side of the harbor, not in the E&N yard, as previously stated.
Oh.
Her hat had also been found some distance from the body. Therefore, it did not necessarily follow that the murderer had returned to town afterward, as immediately supposed by newspapers and their readers.
Okay.
Again, it seemed to indicate that Indians had been responsible.
Ugh.
An ironic twist to the testimony was provided by William Jordan, Mrs. Bing's brother, who stated that she had asked him to accompany her home to assist with a load of heavy parcels. He said he had to decline, as he would have had to return to work.
What?
He also said that she could have been carrying no more than 50 cents in her purse. The tragedy became low comedy when a Mr. Dooman and his 21-year-old sensitive, a Miss Agnes Harris, held a seance at the murder scene.
Oh.
Miss Harris attempting to recreate the crime and to describe the murderer and his subsequent movements. This she did in gory detail, it being reported that after waiting silently for 8 minutes, she proceeded to describe the coming up the railway track of the man and woman describing the clothing of the former with minuteness. There came a blur, and then she saw the murderer wipe his hands on the dead woman's stockings and start for town. He paused, she says, at the end of the trestle and again in the center of the swinging bridge, where he dropped the telltale stockings into the water. She then described his movements about the waterfront as, in a panic, he attempted to find a departing steamer without success. When she resumed her normal condition and the seance was ended, Miss Harris, her mother, Dr. Dooman, and a curious crowd even had enacted the murderer's flight. These people be fucking balls to the walls.
Yeah.
Bonkers.
What? Okay.
Yeah. Although asserting an aversion to notoriety, the good doctor of occult sciences, so Dr. Dooman, had made a second and third attempt to restage the murder. He seems to have lost interest rather suddenly when a newspaper reporter, upon learning that Miss Harris was acting under hypnotic suggestion rather than in a self-induced trance, demanded to know how he, as hypnotist, knew so much about the crime. Reasoning
shit.
that the young woman could only report that which Dooman told her, the newsman found it highly suspicious that Dooman could describe the killer with such minuteness. So people be suspicious.
Okay.
The same reporter rather crudely recalled the strange drowning of the daughter of Dooman's benefactress, a Madame Heller, some time before. Hence the doctor's retirement from the case.
Okay.
Yeah. So they be thinking maybe Dooman is involved.
Yeah.
And maybe because there was also a drowning connected to him.
Right. Okay.
With each passing day, the clues became fewer, a special squad of city and provincial detectives commanded by Chief Shepherd facing a stone wall. Every lead, regardless how slight, was followed up, but in vain. At least they had succeeded in ruling out the likelihood that the crime had been committed by Indians, as everyone on the reserve that night could account for his movements. So, finally, they let them, they're like, okay, it's not them. Even though they literally bring it up so many fucking times.
Jesus Christ.
The posting of a $500 reward brought forth no new information. On October 11, the Colonist reported that, after a week and a half of work on the mystery surrounding the horrible murder of Mrs. Agnes Bing, the police may be said to be one step nearer to the solution of the crime than they were at the outset of their investigations. The detective, insofar as this atrocious crime is concerned, are working in the dark, and will be until accident perchance gives them the end of the thread to follow.
Yeah.
But the end of the thread was never traced, and despite a short-lived report that Mrs. Bing's slayer had been arrested in Saanich, the fiend remained at large. Ironically, during the course of their investigation, police learned that, quite possibly, Mrs. Bing's slaying might have been prevented, for the night previously, a young dressmaker employed in Spencer's Arcade had been accosted by a rough-looking man while following the same route taken by Mrs. Bing. Stepping out beside her, the stranger had asked if she were not afraid of the dark, which is so fucking scary, at which Annie Duncan had ordered him away. Fortunately, at that very moment, she had sighted two approaching shipyard workers, as did her companion, who vanished into the dark. Upon being informed of the incident, Constable Walker, the very officer who was to find Mrs. Bing's body, offered to accompany Miss Duncan to her home the following night, and at the hour when she the experience, Miss Duncan chose to remain in town with her friends that night, and at the hour when the would have been crossing the reserve with Constable Walker as escort, Mrs. Bing met a monster on the railway track. Oh, I get it. So the same, okay, I'm just gonna say this in English, our English now. The same constable that was going to walk Annie across on that night. So this is a different woman. This is not the same woman as before.
Okay.
On that night, she decided that she was going to stay in town instead.
Right.
And so the constable didn't walk Annie across. Agnes went across.
Yeah, and got murdered.
Oh my God. That's crazy. I didn't actually get to the very, very end of that. So, that's that.
Jeez.
Sorry that was so long, but I just thought it would be really interesting to go through it with you. That was written in 1973.
Damn.
Like, do better.
Yeah, actually.
Holy. Like, that was not long ago. That was 50 years ago, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. I know that they're referencing a lot of like really older stuff, but yeah, so that is the story of Agnes Bings.
That's so fucked up. I hope
I
she
know.
found peace.
Me too. I really, really hope that she found
Because I think
peace.
that will be unsolved forever.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Unless Paul Holes. Hey,
Paul.
Paul Holes. Hey, Paul.
Paul. Come check it out.
Paul, I doubt you would ever hear this, but if you hear this, please, can you check out Agnes's Bing's murder? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you for your story.
Thank you for listening, Sarah.
You're welcome.
That was great. If you have any ghost stories, true crime stories, stories, any kind of stories that you would like to share with us, you can email us at ghoulsocietypod@gmail.com, or you can slide into our DMs at ghoulsocietypod on Instagram. All of the resources for our episodes can be found in the show notes in the description box. I like saying show notes. I heard someone say that, and I think I'm gonna keep saying show notes. I'm sure y'all know how to find that.
Yeah.
And
we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Fucking Yawny, bro.
Lol. I hope that we were recording all of that. We were. The red light was on, right? Yeah.
The red light was on.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh-oh.
The red light district.